Hi, everybody. Alan Arnette here with another podcast on the blog on alanarnette.com. It is Sunday, March the 30th, 2025, and this is the weekend update for the Everest 2025 coverage. I'm going to bring in a very special guest here in a few minutes. That's Chris Tomer of Tomer Weather Solutions. Chris is a good friend, lives down in Denver. Here in Colorado, we've climbed a lot of our 14ers together, but Chris provides weather forecasting for climbers all around the world. And this year, he's got a couple of clients, one on each side of Everest, in Nepal and the Tibet side. So there's some interesting things going on weather-wise that we're going to get into here in just a minute. But first, let me start off with that on Friday, the 28th, there were some protests going on in Kathmandu that resulted in 2 deaths and also a curfew being established. They were protesting that they would like to see a return to having the Nepal run as under a king. You know, it was a kingdom for a long, long time. Then they have elected officials, but there's a great dissatisfaction with the bureaucracy and the lack of getting things done. So that's what the protests were about. So those people going over there to trek or to climb, just be aware that it's that in fact the U.S. State Department has increased the concern level from 1 to 2, and that's on a scale of the top being 4, which is absolutely don't travel. So it's really just be smart when you're traveling around in Kathmandu, and just be careful. So the big picture, let's see what's going on. The biggest thing in the last week was that a lot of teams showed up, a lot of Sherpas, I should say, not with clients or climbers, but they all showed up and they began to build the tent platforms and building out, putting up the big dome tents for sleeping and relaxing and cooking and dining. There's all sorts of mostly Nepali companies that are there, from like Snowy Horizon, Seven Summits Treks, Himalayan Guides, Peak Promotion, etc., Asian Trekking, and a few like adventure consultants. They've got all their stuff all packed up and is being headed up. They have over 7,700 pounds of supplies. Think about that. Almost 8,000 pounds of supplies. That's 3,500 kilos. Just absolutely crazy. The Icefall Doctors, they've been working hard. They have got over 3,000 feet, 1,000 meters of the fixed line through the Khumbu Icefall. To my knowledge, they're not at Camp 1 yet, but they've also put in 4 ladders. Uh, and I remember, back when I was climbing it, that we may had like 10, 15, even 20 crevasse crossings. But as the glacier has really thinned, we're going to talk about that again with Chris here in a minute, that a lot of those crevasses are filling in. So on a podcast I had a couple of weeks, maybe last month, with Adrian Bollinger and Mike Hamill, Mike was making the point that because of the thinning glacier, that there's not as many crevasses, thus not as many ladders as needed. So again, 4 this year, that's a really small number, but I don't think they're through the whole thing yet. Another thing that happened this past week was that Everest ER, they've all volunteered docs. They set up their big old weather port tent to serve as the hospital there at base camp. They just do fantastic work. Every year there's volunteer doctors that are there. They provide free health care to all the local people, including the Sherpas, and for a nominal fee, maybe $100, $150, that's typically paid by the guide company. They also provide medical support for the clients or the climbers. Hey, we're getting a feeling for how big the season is going to be this year. It looks like that companies like 8K Expeditions, they have 50 clients, and the giant colossal company Seven Summits Treks, they have over 100 clients. And what's interesting about that is that for every one of those, these days, you've got a ratio of about 1.5 Sherpas or support for every foreigner or every client. So that means that if we've got, let's say, 500 permits, that's 750 Sherpas that'll be working on the mountain. That's 1,200 people. Maybe more, because some companies have 2-to-1 ratios because of the excess oxygen that they're using and starting from Camp 2. So they need a lot more support on the mountain. Well, all of this results in that I said it last week, and I won't be surprised if we have 1,000 summits total this year from both sides, because for the first time since 2019, the Tibet side is going to be operating pretty much as it normally does. They cap it at 300 on that side for everybody, whereas on the Nepal side, there is no cap. Also, another thing that I'm really excited about is that Willie Benegas, of the Benegas brothers out of Argentina. Actually, they live in Utah. But Damien and Willie, Willie's going to be back on Everest. He first summited Everest back in 1999, and he's got 13 summits. He's going for his 14th. So it'll be exciting to watch him. He promises he's going to do detailed blog updates and exclusive YouTube videos. So that'll be fun to watch Willie. He's a great guy. He and Damien used to participate in fixing the ropes, and they also participated in a lot of rescues for people all throughout the years. On some of the other mountains, I mentioned again last week, but it's worth mentioning again that China has closed climbing on Choyoyu from the Tibet side and Shishapangma for unspecified reasons. I'm assuming it'll be open in the autumn, but we'll see how things go. But another thing is that the teams over on Annapurna, that's typically the first 8,000er to get a summit. Well, this year they got up to Camp 3 and they did make an effort, but they ran out of rope because there's so many crevasses that they had to give up on the summit bid because they didn't have enough rope. So now they're waiting for a better weather window to happen. And they've been waiting now for a long time, for like 8 days, 10 days. But that's kind of the game that you play in the mountaineering. But one thing they talk about is that normally between base camp and Annapurna to Camp 1 is snow covered. You use mountaineering boots and crampons. This year, they used trekking boots and no crampons because there's no snow. Which leads me into the discussion I'll have with Chris here in a second. We're going to talk about that the snow line on Everest is actually going up. And also, Nepal just had a very dry winter. So, with that as a setup, let's get into our discussion with Chris Tomer. Hey, everybody, Alan Arnette here with Chris Tomer. Chris, you have a new job as a meteorologist with who?
With Weather Nation here in Denver. They're based here in the Denver area, and they just stream weather 24/7. So I get to do a lot of national weather. I had been working at a local Fox affiliate here in Denver for about 20 years, and so this was a bit of a change. But Alan, so far, so good.
And you also do forecasts for mountaineers all around the planet, including Mount Everest.
Yeah, all the time. That's now become a full-time, full year. There's always somebody going somewhere, dreaming up some sort of trip you've never heard of. And the latest stuff, speed ascent, speed trips, all this kind of stuff. And yeah, so looking at Everest this year, I've got a couple of people I'm going to be working with from both sides of the mountains. So
Nice.
now starting to really just sort of hone in on what the conditions are, and then kind of what I think is going to be the forecast going forward.
So I want to pick your brain on a couple of topics on Everest for this year. There's lots of media reports that have chronicled that the winter in Nepal, this past winter, has been abnormally dry and also warmer than normal. And then also there's another study that came out that I have a link to in the blog that talks about how the snow line is actually increasing on Everest. So let's first talk about the past with this past winter. What was your take on how it was?
Yeah, so one thing kind of feeds into the other one. And
Yeah,
basically, what we've been seeing for the last 6 months is that it's been warmer than normal and drier than normal across a lot of that Everest region and in general, sort of that Himalayan region up in the Everest area. And so essentially, we haven't been getting a lot of snow. And what snow we get's been, it's called sublimating. And so it's basically just going directly into evaporation. And what that does is that actually creates further warming in a lot of that area. And the study that you were talking about, so there's something called the freezing level or the rain snow line, and that changes elevation dependent on temperature. And so typically, you would always hope that that freezing line would be lower at a lower elevation than the Khumbu ice fall that would be a big thing because
right.
you want that to stay frozen. You want the freezing level to be essentially even below base camp. And so what the study was finding was that that freezing level was actually going up to about 6,100 meters, which, creates a lot of problems for freezing, melting, the melt freeze cycle every single day through
Yeah.
the ice fall, through the base. I mean, everything would be moving a little bit faster. And so that was the issue that this scientist was finding. I was taking a look at things. It has been exceptionally dry. There's no question. Um, but interesting, I think those lower elevation temperatures are definitely a little bit warmer than they would typically be. But I'm looking at like mid mountain and higher, and I really don't see much of an effect there. I think the temperatures
Okay.
are just as cold as they've always been. And look, going forward, I really don't see a big problem with those temperatures in the mid mountain and certainly up at the summit. They look just as cold as they've ever been.
So the implications of that are that the ice fall it could be moving more than it normally does or traditionally has,
That would
which
be the
means
conclusion. Yeah.
that those seracs that are sticking up in the ice fall could easily fall over. They always have without any notice at all. And then also 2 years ago in the upper ice fall, three Sherpas died when basically there was a dome that collapsed. And I think that was due to the sublimation or the ice, the actual Khumbu ice fall getting thinner. So
Yes.
it's not receding. A lot of people think that these glaciers are receding. I don't think the Khumbu is receding. I think it's just getting thinner.
Just losing that volume really quick. And then you lose that snow cover, you lose what's called albedo, which is the energy from the sun comes in and it gets bounced back into space. The glaciers act like a mirror, and so when you start to lose that mirror, then there's more absorption, and that just affects the warming even more. So it's kind of a feedback loop. But yeah, I would keep an eye, even if it's just 1 degree,
Hmm.
in temperature rise. I mean, I think that could be significant. So we'll have to keep an eye on that.
I had Mike Hamill and Adrian Bollinger on a podcast last month, I think, and we were talking about this thing in the ice fall. Of course, Adrian Bollinger climbs only on the north because he feels the ice fall is too objectively dangerous. But Mike made the point that because the ice fall is getting thinner, that it's actually becoming safer because
Mhm.
there's less movement in it. However, with what you've just laid out, with the sublimation going on, it may not be that this year.
Yeah, I think that there could be a few things going on at one time. So I don't know. I mean, we'll
Yeah, we'll
we'll see
see.
how it plays out. I mean, if we'll see.
Well, the Icefall doctors have already fixed the route, I think mostly through the Icefall. I don't think there was
Oh, is
Camp
that
One
right?
yet. Yeah, they
Okay.
may be to Camp One. I haven't heard, but I also haven't heard any reports that it's worse than normal. So
Okay.
again, we'll
Good.
see. The other aspect of this is that rockfall.
Mm.
Now, it's interesting that you say that the mid and upper mountain, the temperatures are basically traditionally
Mhm.
the same. Because I was worried about maybe on the Lhotse face or going up the triangular face from the South Col to the balcony, and then especially on the north side where there traditionally is less snow, is typically that side is much rocky. It is more rocky by definition. That with all the second, first, second, and third steps. So I'm a little worried that if you don't have a much snowfall, that's going to increase the rock fall opportunity.
Yeah, that could very well be the case. And that Lhotse face, if there's no snow cover on it, it's just pure ice,
Oh,
right?
it's ice. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just hard ice, and I mean, it's very difficult to get purchase on it. And, I mean, you've got to just so climbers. If you're going to Everest, make sure your crampons are sharp.
Make sure they're sharp
In fact, I would buy two new pair
just to make
and
sure.
the new pair when you leave camp too. So
Yeah.
the north side, you're going to be having clients on the north side for the first time.
Yes, it's been a few years since I've had anybody on the north side, and I always keep up with
Hmm.
Adrian. I don't do anything for him right now, but certainly have a lot of respect for him going to the north side, and I kind of watch and see what his attack plans are, and then kind of look and compare notes with what I'm seeing. And so it'll be fascinating to see what the differences are this year between the north. Typically, it's a little bit colder and it's a little bit windier at times
Right, right.
on that north side, but yeah, so I'll be looking at both sides. And what I'm thinking going forward is that there's definitely a strong signal for a healthy monsoon this year.
Mm.
And, as you know, the timeline for that's sort of like very late in May and then all of June and July. There's definitely a signal for a strong monsoon. So we're going to go through a transition period where it's very dry and warm now. And then that transition will take place between April, May, and late May. And then eventually the monsoon will come in. So we'll have to see, how quickly that transition takes place. But I mean, and I think the question mark is around base camp and the ice fall and to kind of see what the temperatures do. But again, I think otherwise, I would think it'd be a pretty normal year as far as forecasting sort of wind and jet stream. I don't see anything that says, oh my gosh, the jet stream is going to be crazy this year or anything. I think we're transitioning out of La Nina pretty fast and we'll go neutral. So there's not like a big weighting in the atmosphere that points in one direction or the other. So I think that all other things that we've talked about being normal, I think that the season will be pretty typical.
Let's talk about one last thing. We always talk about the weather window,
Mhm.
and basically that's when traditionally it's been when the summit winds are under 30 miles an hour,
Mhm.
and reasonable or no, precipitation of some type, snow, obviously. Um, but what I've always been fascinated by this, Chris, I'm gonna get your take on it. That is traditionally, if you look at the data from the Himalayan database, between May 18th and 22nd, that's where 80% of the summits happen because that's when the winds drop below that 30-mile-an-hour threshold. And what I've always understood and observed is typically typhoons build in the Bay of Bengal off of India. And that high pressure, or I guess it's low pressure, that pressure pushes the jet stream off of the summit just for that little short time. And it's just been amazing to me how it's happened year in, year out since 1953, I guess,
Yes.
or even earlier. Who knows? But is that your take on it? Why that weather
Yeah.
window happens about then?
Totally. And it goes back to what I was just talking about with the monsoon. So
Yeah,
the absolute key to this, to getting this window to open up, is you have to transition from the current pattern to monsoon. And it's in that transition period where the window opens up. So the good thing about this year is that I see a strong signal for the monsoon, which means we're going to have a transition. And that typically happens, and the best period is in May. Like you said, that 11-day window or whatever it is,
yeah.
the atmosphere will transition. The Bay of Bengal will start to open up, the pressures will start to drop, and that should push the jet stream off for that time period. If we weren't seeing a big signal for the monsoon, I'd be a little bit worried. The jet stream might stick around a little bit longer and be a little more erratic. But because I do think the monsoon will come with a healthy signal this year, there will have to be that switch that gets flipped in the atmosphere with the pressures changing and then the window opening.
And does the warming oceans, does that impact that trend?
It does. I looked at the sea surface temperatures as well over the next 2 or 3 months. They look a little bit warmer than normal. And so that feeds into this idea that the monsoon should be a little bit healthier this year than normal. Warmer oceans typically translate into more energy for cyclones in that area to develop.
Wow. Man, you are an expert. Hey, listen, I
What's funny is, I mean, we can look at all this broad stuff,
yeah,
but that it's always so intense when it comes. Once we get to about May 6th, May 7th, everybody starts honing in on that first window.
you're right.
And then it starts to get stressful. And it's like, okay, what are the winds going to be? Will they be under 30? Is it going for how long? And everybody's shooting for that time frame.
Yeah, and the other challenge that you and Mark DeKeyser and Michael Fagan, other professional forecasters in the Swiss team have, is that there's these microclimates on Everest. And I remember one year I was at Camp 3, and we had a perfect forecast, and we got hit by gale force winds, and Connie and I are literally in the tent holding up the tent from collapsing on us as snow and wind was just pummeling us. And people at the South Pole and at base camp are going, well, I don't know what you're talking
Yeah.
about. It's perfect.
That could totally happen. I mean, that's the difference, right? I mean, you were at Camp 3, so there was obviously some sort of wind or that mid to high level wind that was coming in there, but totally missing base camp. And a story to dovetail on that. Last year, I was working for a couple guys who were trying to do a speed ascent. Chris Fisher was one from base camp, and it was so interesting. Like the weather at Camp 3 all the way to the summit was clear. There was no wind. They started at base camp. They had, I mean, it was fogged in. It was snowing up through the icefall, and they had to turn around by the time they got to, like, I think it was Camp 1. That's how different that weather can be from, like you said, the microclimates.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. All right, my friend. Hey, thanks so much for your time and good luck to your clients and good luck to everybody there. And let's have a safe season.
Yeah, Alan, thanks for having me on today. I really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll see how this plays out.
Maybe we'll check back in around May 15th and see how accurate both of us were.
Exactly.
We're either going to be heroes or goats.
That's right.
After
But
all,
you said it's going to be a busy season, a lot of climbers, so this stuff is really important.
yeah, it's going to be a record year. I'm convinced of that. All right. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Alan.
Thanks everyone for listening. I'll be doing this every week throughout the season, and I'll do in between for breaking news or something big happens. Climb on. This is Alan, and remember, memories are everything.
bondo je, de, de, oro, je, de, 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 de Thank you.